flight. Kjell Lindgren is commander of the Crew Dragon spacecraft and the Crew 4 mission, responsible for all phases of flight from launch to reentry. Kjell spent most of his childhood abroad and returned to the U.S. to earn a doctorate of medicine from the University of Colorado. Board certified in emergency medicine, Kjell served as the deputy crew surgeon for STS-130 and Expedition 24. He also flew on Expedition 44 and 45, logged 141 days in space, participated in 2 spacewalks, and more than 100 different science experiments on station.
And Bob Hines is the pilot of Crew Dragon Freedom today, and he's going to be responsible for spacecraft systems and performance, and he's second in command for the mission. He's also going to serve as a flight engineer for Expeditions 67 and 68 on board the station. He was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina, earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from Boston University. After he graduated from there, went to the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School, where he was awarded a Master of Science in Flight Test Engineering, and then went on to complete a Master of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Alabama. A lot of school. In 2012, he was selected as a research pilot at NASA's Johnson Space Center, and then in 2017, got the call to become an astronaut candidate.
Jessica Watkins is a mission specialist for Crew 4. This will be Jessica's first trip to space following her selection as an astronaut in 2017. As a mission specialist, she will work closely with the commander and pilot to monitor the spacecraft during the dynamic launch and reentry phases of flight. Jessica earned a bachelor's degree in geological and environmental sciences from Stanford University and a doctorate in geology from the University of California, Los Angeles. At the time of her astronaut selection, she was a postdoctoral fellow in the Division of Geological and Planetary Sciences at the California Institute of Technology, where she collaborated as a member of the science team for the Mars Science Laboratory rover Curiosity.
And our fourth crew member, Samantha Ferretti, also a mission specialist for Crew 4 from the European Space Agency. In 2001, she graduated from the Technical University of Munich, Germany, with a master's degree in mechanical engineering with specializations in aerospace propulsion and lightweight structures. And she also attended the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training Program at Shepherd Air Force Base in the U.S., where she earned her fighter pilot wings in 2006. She was selected as an ESA astronaut in May 2009, and then in November 2014, launched from the Cosmodrome in Baikonur, Kazakhstan, before returning to Earth in June of 2015 after spending 200 days in space. Then in 2019, she went on a different mission, NASA's 23rd Extreme Environment Mission Operations, also known as NEMO, a 10-day stay in the world's only undersea research station, Aquarius.
Each of these 4 crew members will join Expeditions 67 and 68 once they arrive at the International Space Station.
All right, well, we are under an hour away from launch, so we're getting into really the exciting part of the countdown. We heard that the crew, the closeout crew has left the arm. They're out of the area, and we're getting closer to propellant loading and some of the really exciting moments. SpaceX's Crew 4 mission is the company's 5th crewed spaceflight for NASA. We had the Demo 2 test flight and 3 previous operational crewed missions to station. This is also SpaceX's 7th crewed spaceflight overall, including the Inspiration 4 mission as well as the AX-1 mission, which just recently came home.
Today, our crew is flying the newest Dragon in our fleet, and we'll be taking a ride on board the Falcon 9 that supported the CRS-22 mission in June of last year. Now, it's been a great countdown so far. As Andy has been saying, weather has been looking really good for T0, and again, the excitement just continues to pick up as we get closer to the T0 mark.
It's gone really smoothly so far today. If you joined us at the very beginning, we started with Suit Up just over 3 hours ago, where the SpaceX team helped the crew put on their suits that they're going to wear for all of the launch operations and did the initial checkouts, suit leak checks before they got to the crew walkout. And that's where Kjell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha gave some final goodbyes and some waves to folks gathered outside the operations and checkout building before they climbed into the Teslas and began that roughly 20-minute ride out to pad 39A.
And we did watch as the crew boarded their Teslas and headed down the NASA Causeway, headed towards the launch pad. Once they arrived at the pad, the crew took a moment to enjoy the view of the vehicle they will be taking flight on this morning, and then headed up the fixed service structure.
SpaceX, we are cycling orbit tank isolation valves to equalize low flow pressure.
Freedom copies.
Just some comms there between the crew and the ground. And again, as they headed up the fixed service structure, they began the process known as crew ingress, and that's where the astronauts entered the Dragon spacecraft. The SpaceX team then performed a series of checks to ensure the suits, seats, and vehicle interactions were all functioning properly.
Yeah, they made their way two at a time down that crew access arm, and then getting in one at a time into the Dragon spacecraft. We saw Shell and Bob make the walk down first, followed soon after by Samantha and Jessica. And they were helped into the vehicle by that closeout team, which a little while ago we did hear that they made their way off the crew access arm. They were able to close the hatch with the crew safely inside, execute the side hatch leak check. And so we're less than an hour to go now. And so things are going to start to really pick up as we go through a series of go, no-go polls to arm the launch escape system and then start propellant loading.
The crew poll for readiness was completed at the T-minus 60-minute mark, and the Dragon poll for prop loading is coming up here at about T-minus 55 minutes. And then after that, we'll be at T-minus 45 minutes. There will be an internal mission control Hawthorne poll.
SpaceX, at this time, you are go for Section 6. When you're ready, please report go for launch.
Copy. Freedom is go for Section 6, and put that to work.
Again, just pausing for those comms between the core and the Crew 4 astronauts. At T-minus 45 minutes, we will have an internal mission control Hawthorne poll, and then the launch director's poll for propellant loading. Now, when we get to about the T-minus 40-minute mark, the crew access arm will retract, and the crew will get the call to close their visors and to arm the launch escape system. Now, that's the automated safety system in place that can fire the 8 Super Draco thrusters on Dragon to quickly separate the crew from the rocket, either on the pad or during the flight on the ride uphill.
And then once we reach 35 minutes before liftoff, propellant loading for Falcon 9 will begin, loading fuel and oxidizer on both the first and second stages on Falcon 9. So we'll continue to get views of the crew. They're going to get ready to report their readiness for launch. They're in their suits throughout this entire phase. But for right now, we are just standing by for these final polls, and then we'll get into propellant loading. So with things starting to pick up, let's send it back now to the teams in Florida. Over to you, Daryl.
All right, thank you, Dan. And since we last saw you, our team has grown. Check this out. So Megan MacArthur and I want to welcome a group of NASA social participants onto our launch broadcast. They are standing behind us and all around us. Guys, welcome. So you might ask, what are NASA social participants? This is them, and they are stoked, and here's what they've been doing. NASA puts out an open invitation to social media influencers who engage in STEM and science communication to come out to Kennedy, and you're looking at the pictures of some of the stops they went to around Kennedy. They tour this multi-user spaceport in the days leading up to launch, and it ends with a rocket launch. They get to see it as close as you can possibly get, the same distance that the media and VIPs get to watch it. So I know you guys are excited about that. NASA social participant Camille Calabeo is otherwise known as the Galactic Gal on Instagram. And so you're here with all of your NASA participants, and I want to ask, first of all, how's it going so far?
It has been absolutely amazing. So this is actually my first NASA social. I started my platform during COVID, so you know we haven't had NASA socials since then. And it has been absolutely incredible. I know we had a delay, and so, you know, some of us went home, some of us stayed. We got to come back. We got to see so many things, and I have gotten to meet so many wonderful people from all different walks of life, and some of them are artists, some of them are foodies, some of them are space influencers, and so it's just been really phenomenal to be here and get to experience this with everyone.
Absolutely, and each one of you represent a substantial audience that you're communicating with and sharing the science, which we appreciate so much, so we're so glad that you're here to do that. What's been the favorite part that you've done so far?
That is a really hard question. Everything has been absolutely amazing, of course. But I think the best part for me has been, or was, getting to see 3 different rockets on their pads at the same time. And it really just solidified to me what a time to be alive, right? Mm-hmm. You see SpaceX with Starlink, then you see SpaceX with Crew Dragon, and then you see SLS and Orion taking us back to the moon. And that was just really incredible to see that right here with my own eyes.
Totally. And you guys got lucky, really, because there was a launch last week. You've seen 2 launches. We have NASA socials that don't get to do that. Yeah. So good on you for seeing that. What is one of the more challenging aspects, would you say, to communicating science in this day and age?
Yeah, I think communicating science on social media is challenging for a couple different reasons, but I think one of them is that people just don't have long attention spans anymore, right? You get 30 seconds of people's attention a lot of times. So most of my content is actually on TikTok and those types of really short videos, and you get 30 seconds, and that's really hard to communicate effectively, educationally, and engaging, right? You have to engage your audience and keep them engaged for those 30 seconds that you get. And I think for space specifically, it's challenging because space can be criticized a lot, especially from the general public that might not be otherwise connected to space. And so I think just really communicating why are we doing this and why it's really important to humanity and life on Earth. All
right, well, the Galactic Gal, I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question of a NASA astronaut, Megan MacArthur, put you on the spot.
Oh, you put me on the spot.
What one question would you ask an astronaut?
Okay, so this might be cliche, but I'm sure we have a lot of young people watching, and I would really love to hear from your perspective as a female astronaut. What is something that you would recommend to somebody, say, 5 years old?
Well, I think what I recommend to kids of any age and any gender is to figure out what it is that you love to do. Be curious and try new things, right? Don't decide just one thing. At 5 years old, I'm going to do this one thing, right? Because there's so many other amazing experiences to have. So be curious, ask lots of questions, find that thing that you love to do, and then pursue it and get really good at it.
I love that. Thank you.
All right, while we have all of these social media influencers
here, for all
we want to reach out to our social media influencers and people who are using it out there in the audience throughout the show. We've been taking your questions at the hashtag AskNASA throughout the night. We have time for a few more before Falcon 9 fueling begins, and you can see it in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. This one for Megan. While on the space station, what was your biggest accomplishment?
That's a tough one. I think for me, meeting the challenge of every single day, meeting the schedule every day and whatever that brought was really the challenge, because every single day was different. Some days were easier than others. Some days were really hard. Some days you really had to lean on your crewmates. Some days you really were helping out your crewmates. So it was that maintaining that even keel for the entire 200 days, and I'm calling it 200 days. I think was the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And so to imagine for me, like, what was the most funnest thing about space? Floating around?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, this woman was floating around in space.
You know, it's the camaraderie, right? It's the silly times that you have with your crewmates, the ideas that you come up with. One day, Aki and I took our zero-G indicator, which was a baby penguin, and I taped it to a balloon that I had blown up and then released. And so then the balloon, of course, was slingshotting all over the inside of the U.S. lab with this tiny penguin, you know, with his flippers up and he's zooming around. So stuff like that when you have some downtime, you know, it's a little bit science experiment. It's a lot fun, and it's really great team building. So it's all of those things at once.
And it's a lot of hard work as well, because the astronauts are
serious.
doing a tremendous amount of research there. We're going to talk more about that a little bit later in the show, dive into the ISS stuff that's going on right now and in the future. But for the moment, we want to thank our entire NASA social team for Crew 4 being here. Y'all are fantastic. Oh, very good. Let's now check back in with Andy at SpaceX in California.
Thanks, Daryl. It is T-minus 47 minutes and counting. The SpaceX launch teams are finishing final review of data from checkouts of Falcon 9 over the last hour. The launch director is about to poll the team for readiness. both to load propellant and to launch. And the exciting thing is this is the last pull before we lift off. The 7 SpaceX engineers indicate they are go by electronically voting on the online countdown procedure. The launch director also checks in with Dragon mission director and NASA launch manager to make sure that they are also ready. Earlier, you saw the vehicle assembly building called the VAB. The Falcon and Dragon launch team, as well as key NASA launch members, are in the Launch Control Center adjacent to that VAB. They have a view straight towards Pad 39A, and they're able to see Falcon 9 and Dragon.
And the team is ready for crew
through the large
access arm
windows
retract,
of Firing Room
loading
4.
and launch. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and then approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operator shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise the launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual escape flight rules. In the event of a fire alarm, key operators noted below will remain at their post while the alarm is evaluated. In the event that personnel safety is threatened, evacuate to the south-facing emergency exit, which leads directly outside. Launch control may proceed with arming the crew for movement.
Awesome. So we heard at the very end of that there that we are proceeding with the crew arm movement. So that access arm that is adjacent to the vehicle, that's going to start to move to its launch position.
Operators in Firing 4 and MCCX, the control will be in a lockdown state until launch escape system is disarmed.
It does take a few minutes for the crew access arm to fully retract, and after that, we'll be arming the launch escape system. So on screen, you can see the Dragon capsule with the crew access arm still in the surface position. The crew is on board.
Crew access arm retraction has started.
So great, we got an amazing shot of the crew access arm retracting away from the Dragon capsule. So again, this is going to take a few minutes to fully retract, and then the next major activity is going to be arming that launch escape system of the Dragon vehicle. So far, weather and range continue to be go for launch. We are monitoring the clearance area around the launch pad as well as air and sea space around the flight corridor. Here at Kennedy Space Center, the conditions are predicted to be acceptable for liftoff just about 43 minutes from now. So with that, again, everything is going smoothly on today's countdown. So I'm going to send it back over to you, Daryl. How are things going?
All right, thank you very much, Andy. And the countdown clock continuing at T-minus 43 minutes and counting. Want to recap a few things here for you. The closeout team, they have left the White Room and exited the blast danger area. They are no longer in the picture there that you see. Also, SpaceX teams have pulled go for the LES arm and prop load. That's the launch escape system. And SpaceX Dragon Freedom reports go for launch. And so here we are at T-minus 42 minutes and counting. We're standing by for the next major milestone. We saw the crew access arm retract, and that's one of the last major visual milestones that we'll see in preparation for liftoff. And then shortly thereafter, we'll hear
crew access arm retraction is complete.
And there is the call out that the crew access arm retraction is complete. And so now we're looking towards propellant load. Megan, the propellant loading into the Falcon 9 rocket, this is a big moment. Not a lot of rockets load propellant with astronauts inside the crew capsule.
That's right. This was a new capability that was developed for this vehicle to reduce, I think, overall the timeline. And it's something that the combined teams looked at very closely together from a safety perspective during the development of this vehicle. It's one of the reasons why the launch escape system is so crucial to have that armed. This is a very dynamic activity that's happening, and so we want to be able to keep the crew safe in the event that something off-nominal happens. So that launch escape system being armed is coming up, and that's definitely something that I remember the Demo 2 crew telling us to expect, a loud noise associated with that pressurization of those lines. And so that is something that we were ready for and expected.
How about that? You could hear the pressurizing of those Draco engines?
Yeah, it was not quite instantaneous, but a short duration, very loud sound is what I recall of pressurizing of those
Freedom
lines.
SpaceX for launch escape.
Freedom standing by.
At this time, I can give you a go for Section 7, closed visors and armed launch escape system.
Okay, Freedom copies. Our visors are closed and we are arming the launch escape system.
So what does he do to arm that?
It's a command that is sent to make that a valid exit strategy.
And as the pilot, you're there next to the commander, keeping your eyes on all the systems?
Basically, yeah, agreeing with him when he's sending commands that that's the correct thing to be doing.
When that propellant is loading, can you tell? Can you hear it?
So I thought a lot about that and kind of polled my crewmates and other people I know that have flown. Bob says that he recalls a gurgling sound. Huh. What I recall is more of like a whirring and clicking of the valves moving. So I think everybody's recollection is slightly different. And I had a similar experience on my shuttle flight.
Dragon, SpaceX launch escape system is verified armed.
All right.
Freedom copies concurs.
My memory of the sounds that occur on the spaceship are not as good as my visual memory. And so I think everybody remembers, a slightly different overlapping set of things.
And so we just heard that call out, Megan, that the launch escape system is armed.
Yes.
And now that paves the way for the loading of propellant.
That's right.
The propellant, of course, super chilled liquid oxygen and RP1. Which is a refined kerosene for spaceflight. A look from high above, from the launch tower down onto the Crew Dragon spacecraft and rocket below. That booster getting ready to fly for the 4th time. We got the LES call a little early, so as far as the schedule is concerned, we're running ahead. But we're in a good place because propellant load starts at T-minus 35 minutes.
And the crew will, while they're not actively involved in the propellant loading activities, they're going to be pretty closely monitoring, when the different activities start. Loading the specific tanks with the specific propellants so that they can have a sense of where the vehicle is at every moment.
A live look there at the base of pad 39A, the launch tower, and the strongback, which is part of the transporter erector. It is in the foreground. The rocket is just behind it.
Falcon 9 propellant tanks will be venting for propellant load in approximately 1 minute.
Okay, there you heard in 60 seconds. Venting those tanks in advance of the propellant load. It's 3:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time here on the Florida Space Coast. The overnight launch will light up the night sky here in Florida. The spacecraft at the very top, it's a new one. Crew Dragon Freedom, named by the crew. Although parts of it are being reused. the heat shield, the material from the heat shield. It's the first time they've used the composite heat shield structure, reused it on a Dragon, which is just another advancement in SpaceX's reuse capability. They're able to put flight loads on it to test it and qualify it. NASA has approved it, and it's ready to go, which is interesting because it's seen the saltwater environment, right?
Right.
But they found a way to get that ready for another go.
Yeah, it is. It's remarkable. And that qualification program that you mentioned, very strict. Obviously, it has to be very thorough with multiple teams of people making sure that all of the requirements are met so that there are no safety impacts to reusing these pieces of hardware. But how transformative, really, to be able to reuse pieces that in the past would not have ever been used again, to really bring down the efficiencies and the costs. And ultimately the reliability as we are able to use flight-proven hardware over and over again.
Absolutely. And now here we are just a few seconds away from propellant load. Thinking about the Crew 2 mission as we look forward to Crew 4. When you were up on the space station, it was quite the time up there, right? I'm thinking about the visit from the Russian film crew.
We did have
shooting
some visitors.
A movie.
That's right. That's right. So they came up, an actor and a producer came up on a Soyuz and spent the 10-day time period filming a movie, almost exclusively on the Russian segment. But we were able to interact with them in the evenings. We would occasionally have dinner parties, as we do up there. And so we would get to chat with them a little bit and hear about their lives and hear about their plans.
Was that interesting?
It was very interesting. They were lovely people. They were very gracious
Propellant
guests.
load has started.
There you hear the call out that propellant load has begun. A big milestone. As we are sitting at T-minus 34 minutes and counting. But you were saying, Megan,
Yeah, so it's nice to have some new faces, quite frankly,
Yeah.
and to hear some new stories. And like I said, though, we really did not work with them. They worked exclusively on the Russian segment. And so it did not disrupt our ongoing science work that, of course, we're doing that's so important for our international partners. So I think it would be difficult to carry out a movie production as well as carry out the actual work of the space station.
Just another example of the continued private use of the International Space Station, and I guess you didn't photobomb their shot?
I did not. No, I stayed
Okay.
safely behind the camera or in the other room entirely.
We are now T-minus 33 minutes, 57 seconds and counting away from the second launch of a Crew Dragon with people on board in 2022. Today will begin the next 6-month rotation mission to the International Space Station. The launch escape system is armed. That happened just before we started loading the propellant onto Falcon 9. The Dragon capsule, though, it was loaded with its propellants about a week and a half ago, just a few miles down the road at a facility SpaceX calls Dragonland. In order to fly, Dragon needs a fuel and an oxidizer. So for the fuel, SpaceX uses monomethyl hydrazine, or MMH, and nitrogen tetroxide, or NTO, for its oxidizer. And together, those propellants feed the Draco engines that maneuver Dragon on orbit, as well as the 8 Super Draco engines that would power the launch escape system in an abort scenario. And now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means the 8 Super Draco engines inside Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to pull this capsule away from the Falcon 9 rocket in an instant, should there be any kind of emergency associated with a rocket on the pad, or if there was a problem with the pad. The NASA and SpaceX teams have trained extensively for exactly that type of contingency, and they are ready. Now let's head over to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for an operations update. Andy?
Thanks, Daryl. We are continuing to count down those final minutes, and everything is still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time liftoff just about 32 minutes from now. At the T-minus 35-minute mark, we heard that propellant loading began on Falcon 9. This is going to continue until about the T-minus 2 minute mark. The first and second stages of Falcon 9 are each loaded with 2 liquid propellants. One is fuel loaded into a tank at the bottom of the stage, and the other is an oxidizer loaded into a tank at the top of the stage. The fuel we use to power the Merlin engines is a refined kerosene referred to as RP1. The oxidizer loaded on each stage is a densified liquid oxygen. We also refer to that as LOX. Densified means it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles and takes up less volume. And this basically allows us to store more oxidizer into both of the stages. To ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called TTAB. When TTAB comes into contact with oxygen, it burns, giving off a green-colored flame. Once we have the flame going, we'll add the kerosene fuel into the Merlin chamber, and the engine ramps up to full power. Now, if you pay close attention, you might see the green flash as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation about 2.5 minutes into flight. Topping off helium into pressure vessels on both stages is also underway. This is used to pressurize the tanks in flight as propellant is pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. On board the spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems while propellant is loaded onto the Falcon 9. Again, as Megan had mentioned, the crew training in the simulator included playbacks of sounds recorded in the Dragon capsule during recent flights. So this should be, the sounds that the astronauts are hearing should be sort of familiar. Range and weather, again, as they have been all night, are really tracking green. We're really continuing to report no problems, and there really is a very low probability of violation for weather. As a reminder, today is an instantaneous launch window, so at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down, and our target backup launch opportunity tomorrow night, just under 24 hours from tonight's planned launch. For now, let's turn it over to Jesse and Dan for an overview of events after liftoff.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Again, always great news with some good weather. Just under 30 minutes to T0 today. So for Crew 4, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 16 hours.
And as we await that launch time, just about 29.5 minutes from now, the ground operations teams are doing a series of system checks, ensuring that both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. And you're looking now just over the shoulders of our team out at the Cape there as they prepare for liftoff. As we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, though, we wanted to give you a quick overview of what the ascent portion of this mission is going to look like.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic Launch Pad 39A and make their ascent.
One of the first things that happens about 50 seconds into the flight, those 9 Merlin engines will throttle down as the rocket passes through the period of maximum dynamic pressure. It's max Q. It's really the maximum amount of stress that the vehicle is going to hit on its way uphill. Also worth noting, when we hit max Q, the vehicle will be going supersonic.
Once we are through that period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle down our 9 Merlin engines again. And from there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
Yeah, all just right on top of each other. The first one's MECO, or main engine cutoff. That's where all 9 of those Merlin 1D engines shut off in preparation for stage separation, which is the second event. This is where the first stage detaches from the second. The first stage starts to make its way back to Earth for a landing as the second stage ignites its engine and continues its journey with that third event, that engine ignition. It's called SES-1, or second stage engine start number 1. That's where we'll see the MVAC engine light up and propel the second stage along with the Crew 4 astronauts into orbit.
And as Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back down to Earth. The first is the entry burn, and that's where 3 of the 9 M1D engines will reignite and then shut down again. Now that helps to slow the stage down in preparation for re-entry back into the Earth's atmosphere.
And while the first stage is heading back towards Earth, again, that second stage, it just continues to carry them into orbit until it cuts off. It's 1 Merlin engine that was ignited after stage separation. And once that happens, we wait for the call out and the confirmation of what's called a good orbital insertion, just essentially they're where we expect them to be in outer space.
About 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. Now, the landing burn is just a single engine burn, and that's powerful enough to bring the vehicle's speed down rapidly in order to touch down and land on our drone ship about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
And while Falcon 9's first stage is landing, Dragon is just getting ready to separate from the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. It takes about 3 minutes after we get on orbit, and we just wait for the vehicle to cancel out any rates, essentially make sure everything's nice and stable before the two spacecraft separate. We should get a great view from the second stage of Dragon's trunk as it flies free. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it starts going into a number of checkouts immediately, looking at some of those Draco maneuvering thrusters. There's 12 around the service section of Dragon. Those are the first ones that get checked out. They'll also increase that separation distance from Falcon 9's second stage. These are not the Super Dracos. Those are disabled as soon as we hit this point on orbit. They're only used in an abort scenario. Once we're in outer space, those are disabled for the remainder of the mission.
About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's Nosecone Deploy sequence will begin. It will take roughly 4 minutes for the Nosecone hooks to unlatch and open, and that exposes its guidance navigation controls, or GNC, that will help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
And once that Nosecone's deployed, the remaining 4 Draco thrusters on the forward bulkhead get checked out. And from there, it's about 16 hours for Dragon to go through the rendezvous and approach phases, undergoing a number of what's called phasing burns as it makes its way to the station, just essentially raising its orbit and chasing down the orbiting lab.
Stage 2, cryohelium loading.
And so all of that's going to be coming up soon. Let's check back in with Chelsea over at Mission Control Houston. Chelsea?
Hey, thanks, Dan. Flight controllers here in Mission Control are laser focused on the onboard systems of the space station, making sure it's ready to receive the Dragon vehicle later tonight. They'll also be making sure that all communication links between the station, Dragon, and the ground are working properly. The consensus is that everything is proceeding nominally. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will monitor the autonomous docking of the Dragon spacecraft tonight. They'll perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the hatches both on the Dragon side and inside the station's pressurized mating adapter. We expect hatch opening to take place about an hour and a half after docking. Once on board, the astronauts will be greeted by Space Station Commander Tom Marshburn, and the whole space station crew will join in for welcoming remarks to the new crew members. From there on out, they will no longer be referred to as Crew 4, as we're calling them today, but rather flight engineers of the International Space Station. Here in Mission Control, Flight Director Anthony Varia is on console overseeing the team for launch, and Adi Boulos will be on console for docking. But we'll be on air continuously through Crew 4's arrival, but launch coverage of docking is expected around 8:15 p.m. Eastern. And that's it for Mission Control. I'll toss it back to the team in Florida. Daryl, I'm excited for launch. How's it looking?
All right, thank you, Chelsea, and so are we. We're looking great weather-wise here. Range is green, weather is green, and well, we're green and ready to go for this launch. We are just T-minus 23 minutes and counting from the launch of Crew 4, the 4th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. And it's going to be a good one, folks. The 4 astronauts are strapped in. Commander Kjell Lindgren, pilot Bob Hines.
מגיע, מגיע, מגיע. מגיע, אחי. מגיע, אחי.
אני יוצא. מסדר כבוד משמר הכנסת, ערוך ומוכן לסקירתך. דגלת תשקו. דגל, שקט.
Now standing in front of the Gal Ed, the memorial to Israel's fallen soldiers. It was designed by the artist Zelig Segal in 2007. The base of the monument is a pool of water, a symbol of life and generational continuity. Above this base sits a steel plate, symbolizing the tools of war. This steel plate is set at a slight angle so that it doesn't entirely cover the pool of water, a symbol of loss and of mourning, and it resembles the Jewish tradition of tearing one's garment when in mourning. The burning flame in the center of the monument is a symbol of hope and of memory. As the monument is low to the ground, in order to appreciate it, we must bow our heads, instinctively paying our respects to the fallen and honoring their memories. The raised letters at the base of the monument are aligned by the poet Leah Goldberg. In their blood, the morning will rise.
הלכתי, עידן.
We actually do the same exact things for the second stage engine, and that happens during ascent, but we should hear the call out after liftoff for that as well. And again, that is coming up in about 15 seconds, and we should hear the call outs over the nets.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
And that was the call out. So again, a small amount of super chilled liquid oxygen being flowed into the Merlin engine turbopumps. There was 9 Merlin engines on the bottom of the first stage.
All right, now we've got a couple more events coming up. Right at about T-minus 6 minutes, so in 40 seconds from now, our next prop load milestone will be complete. We'll have all of the RP1, the fuel for stage 1, fully on board. It's at about 99% right now, so we should hear that any moment. After that, we'll hear a number of call-outs related to the Dragon flight computer. They'll get ready to configure for terminal count and then move on to internal power.
RP1 load is complete.
And there we hear the RP1 load is complete, so we got that a little early. So all of the RP1, the refined kerosene, is on board the Falcon 9, both the first stage just completing. We already heard that the second stage completed a short time ago. Coming up, we're going to hear the call out for Dragon to transition to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power. And then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 getting ready to pressurize, adding some additional rigidity and structural support as we get ready for the strong back to retract. It'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we'll see it swing open completely at the moment of liftoff. And that strong back providing access to Falcon 9. It's also providing all of the fueling lines and umbilicals for both prop load and all of the different gases being loaded on board the vehicle. So those are coming up. We're going to continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones as well. The final one we're going to hear is at just 2 minutes before flight, when we get the liquid oxygen finished on board that second stage.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count. Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
So that call out that we just heard, Falcon 9 is beginning to pressurize for the strong back retract. So if you look closely on the left-hand side of your screen, or excuse me, the left-hand side of the vehicle, there is a large truss structure. That is the strong back. We have some clamp arms just at the bottom of Dragon. In about...
Retract sequence has started. Stand by for middle arm movement.
Well, right now, those clamp arms are beginning to open up. You can see them right behind all of the white clouds around the vehicle. Once that is fully open, then the strong back structure will retract away to its pre-launch position about 2 degrees away from the vehicle. And as we get closer to D0, it will continue to recline back to make room for Falcon 9 and Dragon to lift off and clear the launch pad. And so here's a great shot of those clamp arms at the bottom of the screen, opening wide open. And we should see that structure to the right of Falcon 9 and Dragon begin to recline away from the vehicles. This whole sequence takes about a minute, a little over a minute to fully complete, and we expect this to complete in about 15 minutes. Or 15 seconds. So you can see on screen that strong back is beginning to recline away from Dragon and Falcon 9.
All right, now coming up next is going to be the finish of loading that liquid oxygen on the stage 1. We finish up on the liquid oxygen.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
There we go. All of the oxidizer loaded on to stage 1.
Yep, and in about a minute here, we should hear the last call out related to propellant. That's going to be stage 2 LOX load complete. And again, that is the last of propellant loading on
Dragon
the vehicle.
Is in terminal count and on internal power.
And as we wait for that call out, all of the white clouds that you're seeing on screen, that is normal and expected for us at this stage in the countdown. We'll continue to see them build up as we get closer and closer to D0. We want to make sure that we are keeping the tanks as full as possible, and the warm ambient air of Florida is, helping to create those clouds around the vehicle.
Coming up on 2 minutes until liftoff, standing by for stage 2 LOX load being completed.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete. Dragon is in auto idle.
All right, Dragon's flight computer and auto idle. Next, it'll flip over to countdown.
Expect loud venting.
Gas closeout has started, so we're now isolating all of the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. They're going to then get vented. Hear that venting start. They're going to get vented overboard through umbilicals and through the strong vac itself. Coming up at T-minus 1 minute, we're going to hear Dragon is in countdown. Its flight computer will switch to countdown mode. We'll also hear that the flight termination system on Falcon 9 is armed. Falcon 9 will move into startup and take over control.
FTS is armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling. Dragon is in countdown.
Dragon's flight computer in countdown. The FTS, that flight termination system on.
Freedom, SpaceX, go for Crew 4 launch.
Freedom is go for launch.
SpaceX reports go. Crew reports go.
T-minus 30 seconds.
You heard it there. 30 seconds away from liftoff. T-minus 20.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff. Go Falcon. Let freedom ring. Got speed 34.
Vehicle is pitching downrange. Copy 1 Alpha.
Freedom soars and the Dragon flies forward. Vehicle already pitching downrange. All 9 Merlin engines have lit.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Getting good performance on stage 1 propulsion already.
We are T plus 35 seconds into the 4th rotational crew mission on board Dragon and the Falcon 9. The 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage are beginning to throttle down.
Stage 1 throttle down.
In preparation for max Q. This is where the vehicle will experience the highest amount of aerodynamic pressures, so we'll throttle down the engines in preparation for that event.
Vehicle is supersonic.
All right, so we've passed the speed of sound. We're already
Max Q.
And there's our call out for max Q.
Stage 1 throttle up.
So right after max Q, we will begin to throttle those engines up again.
Copy 1 Bravo.
And 1 Bravo, so we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage. Continuing to get good performance, though. The crew already pulling in excess of 2 Gs. And coming up next is going to be a couple of events in rapid succession.
Yep, in about 10 seconds here, we're going to be performing engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine. And then in about a minute, we're going to start off with MECO, also known as main engine cutoff. This is where those 9 engines that you're seeing ignite on, being lit up on screen, those are going to cut off in preparation for stage separation, where the first and second stages will separate from one another, and then the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry our Crew 4 astronauts to orbit.
Heard that MVAC chill has started.
Stage 1 throttle down.
The 9 Merlin engine starting to throttle down. And standing by for MECO.
And MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
All right. So MECO, stage separations confirmed.
Stage 2 Alpha.
And ignition.
You see that second stage engine light. We're in 2 Alpha, the second abort mode. The second stage is lit, continuing to carry the Crew 4 astronauts onto orbit.
And this is a fantastic view. On the left-hand side, this is the first stage, now separated from the second stage, but it's still being illuminated by that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage on the right-hand side of your screen. So right now, the first stage is making its way back to Earth to attempt its 4th landing on our drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. The crew is on the opposite side of the engine that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. They are continuing with their journey to outer space.
Seeing good performance on that lone Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The cruise G-load dips right when we hit that separation event, and it's going to continue to build up now. Just heard acquisition of signal Bermuda. That means we're
Dragon,
now...
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That was our guidance, navigation, and control officer. Nominal trajectory. Dragon's pointed in the right direction, continuing its flight to orbit. We heard Bermuda called out. That's one of the ground stations now receiving telemetry from the Dragon as it continues its path uphill. So we'll have the dueling boxes here for a while as the first stage makes its way down. That second stage going to continue firing until about a little over 8 minutes into the flight. Doing the heavy lifting now.
The first stage has a couple of events itself in order to land on a drone ship. So at T plus 7 minutes and 25 seconds, it's going to start its entry burn. It's going to be one of 2 burns. This is where 3 of the 9 Merlin
Dragon,
engines
SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
on the first stage will relight and burn for about 30 seconds in order to slow the vehicle down before hitting the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Acquisition of signal, New Hampshire.
All right, now on the New Hampshire ground station, another call out there from our guidance, navigation, and control officer, nominal trajectory. Second stage continues to power. Call out just then, propulsion is nominal, the engine performing as expected. Crew pulling a little more than 1 1/4 Gs right now. Again, that's going to continue to ramp up, peaking just before we get to that second stage cutoff.
Yep, this single engine here, Dan, can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space, so they are definitely feeling it.
And we're already about 200 kilometers in altitude.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
Great call out that we are headed in the direction that we need to, and we just heard from Chell, the commander.
And we should get one more of those trajectory check-ins in about 30 seconds from now. And then we'll start to hit our events in rapid succession as the first stage continues to make its way back home. The second stage will start to wrap up its job of delivering these astronauts into orbit.
Yeah, we don't see it on screen right now, but the first stage is making its way back to our drone ship in about...
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
In about 30 seconds here, it's going to start its entry burn.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
And there was the other call out that you were mentioning, Dan, about the trajectory. Things, again, continuing to look very, very good for the ascent portion.
Stage 2 flight termination system.
So for those just joining us,
Stage
we
1
are
entry burn startup.
just under 8 minutes into flight. We have 4 astronauts as part of the Crew 4 operational mission. You can see on the left-hand side, this is our first stage with 3 of 9 Merlin engines reignited and slowing down the first stage before we hit the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere. So this first stage has one more burn left.
Burn shut down.
That's going to happen just before the T+9 minute mark, and then we'll attempt landing for the 4th time on our drone ship that's currently parked in the Atlantic Ocean.
So as that entry burn completes,
Terminal guidance.
we're in the final stages of the second stage's flight into orbit. We're about to pass through several of the different abort phases, which essentially correspond to areas along the very northeastern seaboard of the U.S. and then across the Atlantic and off the coast of Scotland. But continuing to get call-outs that Stage 2 propulsion is nominal.
Copy, Shannon.
And the call-out of Shannon, Ireland, that's
Stage 1 transonic.
indicative of our final abort zone.
And after this second stage engine shuts off its engine, we are going to be listening for the confirmation of a good orbit, which tells us that the crew and Dragon are where they need to be in
Stage
orbit.
1 landing burn.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
And that was the call out that we wanted on the second stage. Here's a fantastic view.
We're glad to be in orbit.
Of the
Dragon
first stage.
SpaceX launch escape system is disarmed.
Fantastic view of the first stage. Landing legs have been deployed, returning back to Earth for a fourth time. And just like that, a fourth landing as part of the Crew 4 mission. You can hear the applause behind us. But prior to this,
acquisition signal Newfoundland.
we saw the crew, we heard that the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit, and this is them in 0G, and 2 of them for the first time.
And getting a look, it looks like we might have a couple of 0G indicators. I see a turtle in Bob Hines' hands. That is the nickname for the astronaut class from 2017, of which he and Jessica Watkins were a part. I believe we've got a monkey floating over by Samantha Ferretti. But first view of Crew 4 on orbit, experiencing microgravity. They're still attached to that second stage, which at this point is going to continue to coast for a couple of minutes. It's got small reaction control thrusters on the upper part of the second stage that can be used to cancel out rates, essentially making sure that they're on a stable coast before we get to that separation event, after which we'll see Dragon Freedom flying free for the first time.
We've got, a couple of stowaways. The Turtle class really does seem to be taken over now with a Turtle 0G indicator.
All right, we should be just about a minute away from that separation, after which a number of activation checkouts occur automatically. First, checking out 12 of those Draco maneuvering thrusters all around the service section of the Dragon capsule. We'll also start to get ready for the nose cone opening, which it stays closed for the flight uphill to help protect all of those guidance, navigation, and control sensors. It's also covering 4 of the Draco thrusters that we're going to be using for providing the majority of the thrust, the push, for these different phasing burns as Dragon chases down the space station. But all right, standing by for separation.
So typically we'll get a shot from the second stage looking at the unpressurized service section of the Dragon. And there it is. What a magnificent view.
And looking like a good separation, good rates.
Roll-ups and
Dragon Freedom flying free for the very first time. So again, now those Draco checkouts are starting. And pretty shortly we'll get to the Nosecone Deploy. And that's when they'll start to open up hooks that are holding the Nosecone in place. And it sounds like that has begun.
And expect the signal New Hampshire.
So though the crew, as we see them here inside Dragon, they have separated from the second stage, but they still have about a 16-hour journey before making it to the International Space Station and docking tomorrow, or today, later on today. But it is so great to see them flying free in space.
And we did get confirmation that that Nosecone Deploy sequence has started. So again, those 6 hooks that hold the Nosecone in place during the launch and ascent portions have to retract, and then the Nosecone will be able to start to swing open and deploy, and that will uncover a number of critical systems for Dragon's flight up to the space station, not the least of which
Freedom, LD, I hope you enjoyed your ride. It's been an honor flying with you, Chell, Farmer, Samantha, Jessica. Have a safe journey to the space station. Say hi to Crew 3 for us, and we'll look forward to seeing you when you get home. Indeed, the dream is alive. Now some words from our CE.
Dragon, CE, privilege having you fly with us. Good mission. We'll see you later.
And from Freedom, we want to thank a big thank you to SpaceX, the Commercial Crew Program, and specifically the Falcon 9 team for a great ride. It is a privilege to get to fly this new vehicle, the Crew Dragon Freedom, to orbit. Huge thanks to the teams that assembled and prepared her for flight. We're feeling great and looking forward to the view.
All right, so some congratulatory words from the launch director and the chief engineer up to the crew on board Freedom. Chell radioing down their thanks for the smooth ride to orbit. So, as Andy said, we've got about 16 hours.
And Freedom, SpaceX can confirm nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts.
Okay, Freedom copies. Equals activation complete. We're going to go visors up.
And that call from the Corps here in Hawthorne.
Corps copies, your go.
Indicating that we had good checkouts of those 12 Draco thrusters around the service section. There's 4 to go after we get the Nosecone open and the ECLIS, the Environmental Control and Life Support System, activated and running inside Dragon. Crew will be able to get their visors open and pretty soon get out of their suits and settle in for a 16-hour ride to the space station. So, with Crew 4 now successfully on orbit, let's head over to our counterparts at the Kennedy Space Center. It looked great on TV. I'm sure it was even better in person. Daryl, Megan, how are things over there on the ground?
Well, thank you very much, Dan, and you're absolutely right. It was phenomenal here at the Kennedy Space Center watching the launch of Crew 4. Wow, Megan MacArthur, NASA astronaut, pilot for Crew 2, and she's been on the space shuttle. You got to watch that launch, and I saw you taking it in.
It was spectacular. It really was wonderful to see a launch up close again, a night launch, which has been a while since I've seen one in person. Just spectacular. It never gets old. I think if it gets old, you're probably in the wrong business.
Absolutely. It was so loud, so powerful. The roar of the engines when it lifted off, it seemed louder than usual, but that just might be because of the atmospherics. And then that light off the water, what a beautiful sight. Not only were we watching, but also crew on station tuned in to the NASA TV broadcast, watching them lift off as they await for them to arrive tonight at 8:15.
That's right. I know they're excited for lots of reasons. One, they're going to get to see their friends, and they're going to get to come home themselves, so they're looking forward to it.
All right. Well, Megan, thank you for your thoughts on that. And We also have a very special guest who watched the launch with us here at the Kennedy Space Center. Let's get over to Megan Cruz, who is with one of the astronauts who walked on the moon almost 50 years ago. Megan?
Yeah, I am really honored to be standing next to Apollo astronaut Harrison Schmitt. I really cannot believe I'm standing next to you. It really is an honor.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy I'm here.
Oh, well, we're so thrilled to have you here. And actually, we're going to pull up some old photos of you. Why don't we take a trip down memory lane?
Hey, why not?
So for those who don't know, Harrison was the last person to step on the moon with Apollo 17 in 1972. What picture are we looking at right here?
Well, this is the crew, Ron Evans, Gene Cernan, myself. This is sort of the publicity shot with the lunar rover. We were the third mission to have a lunar rover that we drove around on the surface of the moon. We actually landed in a valley deeper than the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And the rover enabled us to visit both sides of the valley and really just had not only a great time, but tremendous scientific return.
How does it feel to look back on these pictures? There's you on the moon there. To look back on these pictures and to be standing here 50 years later and you just watched Crew 4 launch.
Well, of course, I'm happy to be standing here 50 years later.
Good point.
And the launch of the Falcon 9 and the Dragon to the International Space Station was spectacular. You know, those of us that rode a Saturn V into space, you know, are a little bit jaded about the smaller rockets, but still, it really was something. And on board was a geologist,
yes.
Jessica Watkins.
Yes, you got your special invite today from Jessica. I mean, what do you think about that?
That's great. Jessica and I have worked a little bit in Houston with the lunar samples and the like during the Apollo 11 celebration, 50th anniversary celebration, and she was very kind enough to invite me and my wife here, my wife Teresa Fitzgibbon, and we sort of consider ourselves the Jessica team.
Oh, that's so sweet. Just what do you think about the fact that there is a geologist on board, the importance of having a geologist for this mission?
Well, for me, I did not have a chance to gain the kind of operational experience that Jessica is getting. I gained my operational experience from learning to fly T-38s and helicopters, and then a lot of simulator time. She's gaining it in space, and that's very important.
Yeah.
And you know, I hope it'll stand us in good stead for being part of one of the Artemis crews that goes to the moon.
Yeah, absolutely. Artemis, let's talk about that. That's going to return us to the moon. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. It's been a long time. There have been several attempts to get us back there. The two Bush presidents both tried to get something going, and it didn't materialize, but maybe Artemis is the third time's a charm.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to it, believe me.
Do you think we're ready to go back to the moon? We need to go back to the moon?
Oh, I think we've been ready for a long time. The technology is there. The big difference is NASA had to develop the technology for Apollo, advance old technologies as well as new technologies. The thing that's changed is the commercial sector has taken the NASA technologies and moved forward, and now NASA has to integrate that into a new lunar program such as Artemis. And you saw that tonight with the Falcon 9 launch. That was developed by the SpaceX Corporation, and it's turned out to be an extraordinarily reliable vehicle for launches in general, and in particular now the fourth launch to the International Space Station.
Yeah, well, like you said, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you will that you witness Crew 4, and then also that you'll see Artemis launch soon. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great, and my best to everyone in NASA, and keep doing great work.
Perfect. Thank you so much.